Let's go to Michael in Seattle, Washington. Independent line with Bill Press, his new book, Trump Must Go. Good morning.
Hi, Mr. Press. Thanks very much for all your hard work trying to inform the public as to progressive ideals.
Thank you.
I was wondering, do you think that the Democratic Party will actually begin to listen to the voters and begin to get behind the legalization of cannabis? Because I think that's a big part of why Andrew Gillum won in Florida, promising to legalize marijuana.
I missed part of that. There's a little clip there, but I think the question is about
legalizing marijuana.
Well, I think more and more, in fact, I believe Andrew Cuomo in this primary election has reversed or changed his position and now supports the recreational use of marijuana in New York. No, I think I think not just the Democratic Party, Michael, I think the American people are moving in that direction. I used to think there was a race between same-sex marriage or marriage equality and legalization of pot as to which one was going to get to 50 states first. Well, with the help of the Supreme Court, marriage equality got there first. It won't be long before recreational use of marijuana will get there. But there's still, sadly, I think, some states that even haven't, they're not even in the 20th century, let alone the 21st century, haven't even recognized the importance of medical marijuana. But I think particularly in those states like Washington, like Oregon, now like California, starting in Colorado, where legalization has occurred, there have been zero problems, but there's been an avalanche of new tax money for those states. When other states look at this, they're going to go along either by state legislature or by state initiative, but it's going to happen. And while we're talking about Seattle, I've just got to say, you know, one other name that doesn't get mentioned very often in terms of prospects for 2020 is the governor of Washington, Jay Inslee, former member of Congress, great governor, head of the Democratic Governors Association. I think he'll be a real contender in 2020 and should be.
This is a couple of tweets.
Washington Journal continues.
We want to welcome back author and syndicated radio host Bill Press. Thanks for being with us.
Nice to see you, Steve.
The book, Trump
Happy end of August. Can you believe it?
Where did the summer go?
So this means that the Robert Mueller investigation ends tomorrow. That's what Rudy Giuliani said. September 1st, right?
The book is called Trump Must Go, the top 100 reasons to dump Trump and one to keep him. And let's begin where the book begins. Enough is enough. We can't take it any longer. The country cannot absorb any more. Chaos and corruption have become the new normal. Somehow we have managed to endure almost 2 years of Donald Trump's disastrous presidency, but this madness cannot continue.
I think that lays it out. That's the point of the book. And, you know, a lot of us, those of us who didn't vote for Donald Trump, we still thought we're Americans, we respect the presidency. And so, you know, we'll give this guy a chance to prove that he's up to the job, that he is worthy of representing us as Americans. I think he has proven that he is not. He's not worthy of the job. And his policies, and you can look at Donald Trump, I think, in two levels, which I do in the book. You know, one is, and mainly the book is focused on his policies, and that's what we ought to be looking at. That's what's most important. I think his policies, both here and abroad, have been a disaster and very dangerous for this country. But you can also look at him as a person. And I think as a person, he's just, we deserve better than that. I mean, this is a man, I don't have to go into all the things we know about his personal life, that we're not proud of. We wouldn't want our children to grow up like him. We wouldn't say, look at the president, there's your role model. We're embarrassed by this guy. So I think the point of the book is, you know, some people, I'm sure, will disagree. To me, this is like a patriotic book in that I go right back to the Declaration of Independence and cite the Declaration of Independence, that we're the boss in this country. We have a right and a duty when we elect our representatives and our government. And when the government becomes so tyrannical that it's infringing on our rights, we can't stand it anymore. We, the people, have a right and a duty to rise up and overthrow that government. We did it against a tyrannical king. We can do it against a tyrannical president. And the first step to do that, I want to quote, if I can, just quickly, Thomas Jefferson, right, who says, "The history of the present is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world." So I decided I would take Jefferson's direction and submit the facts for getting rid of Donald Trump.
But you are also very personal. You say, quote, "Before you consider Donald Trump the president, you have to deal with Donald Trump the person, because his bizarre personality trumps all. We have never had a more loathsome, disreputable, obnoxious person in the Oval Office, nor anyone so manifestly unfit for the job of president. Conservative voices agree." But if you talk to conservative Republicans, they like the fact that there are conservatives on the court. They like the Brett Kavanaugh nomination. They like the tax cuts. They like the strong economy.
That's true. First of all, I do want to point out again, that is the first part of the book. And I do say, as I said earlier, you look at the person, you can look at the person, you can look at his policies. Most of the book is devoted to his policies. The Iran nuclear deal, the Paris Climate Accords, his immigration policies, on and on and on. But you cannot ignore Donald Trump, the person. And again, I think he is a loathsome personality, a guy who brags about sexual assault, who calls women dogs, who's paid hush money to prostitutes and porn stars so they won't talk about all the affairs that he's had with them. It goes on and on and on. Not somebody I would ever hold up as a role model, but I think you're touching on something which I believe history will be kinder, actually, to Donald Trump than they are to these Republicans across the street, the Republican leadership. This is behavior in both in terms of policies and the personality that they would never, never tolerate in anybody else. And they do so for Donald Trump. They look the other way. They turn a blind eye because what have they always wanted? Tax cuts for the rich and more conservative judges on the courts. And as long as Donald Trump is giving on that and going along with that, they don't give a damn what he does about the Russia investigation or Robert Mueller or collusion or obstruction of justice or all the personal stuff. They don't care.
Our guest is Bill Press, former chair of the California Democratic Party and formerly on CNN and MSNBC, now heard on the radio, syndicated columnist, and the latest book, number 10.
Number 10. I always say, if you don't like this book, number 10, you can take this book, number 9, which also came out earlier in the year, which we've talked about here on C-SPAN, Bill Press from the Left. This is my memoir, part 1.
And what a memoir it is. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not going to... There are things in there that one never knew before. But let's go back to your book. And one reason to keep him, you write about the Vice President, Mike Pence. Quote, "It could still be worse. We could be stuck with Mike Pence. He has buffaloed a lot of people, liberal and conservatives. His political agenda comes right out of the Franklin Graham playbook, and he is the most disgusting suck-up to Trump of anybody in the White House."
Well, I think he is, and I think he knows. First of all, the point is that with all of his faults, Donald Trump is still sort of a bumbler, you know, and he makes mistakes. He's not very effective. Look, what did he promise to do? Build the wall. We don't have the wall. Repeal Obamacare. He didn't repeal Obamacare. End the nuclear threat with North Korea. He didn't do that. I mean, he hasn't basically accomplished anything except the big tax cut bill. So he's pretty, as dangerous as he is, he's pretty ineffective. Mike Pence, he knows what he's doing. Mike Pence is an insider. He's got a lot of respect on Capitol Hill. He's been there as a member of Congress. He's been there as a governor. He knows how Washington works. He knows how to get things done. He knows how to at least keep a low profile and deal with people. He's not the flamboyant, in-your-face, ugly attack dog that Donald Trump is. And I think that from a policy point of view, Mike Pence could be more, that's what my point is, he would be more dangerous and more effective than Donald Trump, because he would get things done.
Let's bring in our viewers and listeners. Mike is joining us from Lothian, Maryland, Republican line with Bill Press.
Hi, guys. How are you doing this morning?
Good, Mike. It sounds like you're listening on C-SPAN radio, so thank you.
Great. My only comment is this is what the ineffectual Democratic Party has always been about for the last couple of years. Just hate on Donald Trump and hope we win some elections, but it's just not going to happen. You attack these people purposely. You see how you backpedal when he told you your comment about calling Mike Pence disgusting. You're just full of personal attacks. You call Donald Trump this and that. We know what we got with Donald Trump. We know he's not the most faithful man. We know that he's not colluding with Russia. We know he's an American patriot. I mean, you don't understand how ineffectual your arguments are, and they might work in California, but they don't work in the other 49 states because it's just hyperbole and it's ineffectual. I mean, if you got your stuff together and you actually told people some kind of semblance of a plan, other than the socialist plan that y'all are falling into, that trap has been laid for you, and go right after it. Because after 2020, it's going to be Mike Pence. Then
okay, Mike,
it's going to be Barron.
We'll get a response. Thank you, sir.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to point out that I was chair of the California Democratic Party some 20-some years ago. I do national television and national radio now. I'm not here to speak for California, and I have nothing to do with the Democratic Party other than being a Democrat. But the idea that Donald Trump could only win in California, I just want to remind Mike that he lost the popular vote. Right? He did win the Electoral College. He is president of the United States legitimately. I'm not questioning his presidency, but he lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton. Obviously, his policies and his person are not that popular, and I would point out that basically his approval rating has been roughly the same since he became president, in the mid to high 40s, hasn't moved. That's his base. His base is never going to move. I think the rest of the American people are taking a second look, and I would look at the success of Andrew Gillum in Florida, of Stacey Abrams in Georgia, Ben Jealous in Maryland. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez up in the Queens, and there's something happening out there. I think people are seeing opportunity to make a change.
But isn't that significant that despite all of the headlines and all of the negative stories of Donald Trump, he has remained steady in the mid-40s?
No, it doesn't surprise me at all. Those people are blind to any faults of Donald Trump or any difficulties about Donald Trump at all. A lot of them, and sincerely, I don't mean to beat on it, sincerely, they wanted somebody who's going to shake up the system. And God knows Donald Trump has done that. And I think that was, and they still see him as somebody, they are America, and Bernie Sanders saw this too, and Donald Trump. They both saw there was a deep dissatisfaction with the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, with establishment politics. And that's what I think appealed. That's why Donald Trump appealed to so many people and still does.
We'll go to Blacksburg, Virginia, Democrats line. Steve, good morning.
Yes, good morning. It's such a pleasure to actually get to speak to Bill Press because I watch his show all the time.
Oh, well, thank you.
He and Tom Hartman are two of my greatest mentors in history and government, and
Wow.
But the one thing I really wanted to talk about is how do we actually get the Democratic voters to get out and show their power this year? I mean, I've seen the women's movement, the youth movement. Hopefully the millennials will actually get out there and do something this year. We've got to change this government.
Thank you, Steve.
Steve, that's an excellent point, and I tell you, it's one of the things that I feel most excited about this year, which is we're seeing an energy and a momentum and an excitement about politics, particularly on the Democratic side, that we haven't seen. I haven't seen in this country since, I think, the anti-Vietnam War protests back in 1968, and it's showing up. I mean, there have been 49 state legislative seats since Donald Trump became president. 49 seats in deep red districts that Donald Trump carried by double digits that have flipped from red to blue. And why is that? That's because people are turning out. They see the opportunity. Again, look at Andrew Gillum in Florida. Look at Stacey Abrams in Georgia. Even in districts where Democrats have not won special elections, they have a record turnout among Democrats. So you do see the energy there, particularly among young people, particularly among people of color, particularly among women. And I think it's going to make a big difference in the House. And the point, Steve, back to the book, is, you know, this is not a call for impeaching Donald Trump. This is just a call for making a change. It can happen. That's above my pay grade, right? Robert Mueller could indict him. Congress could impeach him. But what I'm talking about is the American people, like the Declaration of Independence, back to that. It's the American people. We have to do our job. And the first place we have to do our job, I believe, is in the midterm elections coming up, because that's one way to put a big roadblock in front of a lot of Donald Trump policies by Democrats taking back the House or the Senate. So this is, in effect, is a call to arms, meaning a call to vote, which is so important.
The book is titled Trump Must Go. You list 100. We have just a few of them. We'll put them on the screen. And for those listening on C-SPAN radio, he's a pathological liar. He's lazy and woefully ignorant. He's an overgrown toddler. He's a racist and sexist. He's a sexual predator, you write in Trump Must Go. Also, he's addicted to Twitter and Fox News. He is still obsessed with Hillary Clinton, and he is against everything Obama was for. Let's go to Susan, joining us from Fort Myers, Florida, Independent Line with Bill Press.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for taking my call. Bear with me. I'm an old lady. I try to be neutral and stand back and look at things. And it reminds me of the Roman Empire. They kept their military in top condition. The military had all the choices, and as far as the people, give them their food and their bread and their circuses. And I feel like I'm living in in the movie Groundhog Day. It seems like Trump is trying to cause a division between the military, which he is constantly complimenting, opposed to the people. Well, we're all one and the same thing. And extremism, if you look at it through history, is not a good thing in either direction.
Thank you, Susan.
Yeah, Susan, thanks. Good to talk to you. Thanks for calling. There again, Florida's got a chance to make a big difference this year.
There's a piece, by the way, in the Washington Post by Karen Tumulty saying it's basically a petri dish with Ron DeSantis, the Trump candidate, and Andrew Gillum, the progressive left candidate, for potentially what 2020 will mean.
You could not have a greater contrast in American politics today than the governor's race in Florida. And it really is. You have an extreme Trumper in Ron DeSantis, who is he's there because Donald Trump intervened in a Republican primary on behalf of the guy that he liked seeing on Fox News. I mean, that's fine, but I mean, that's how Ron DeSantis won. And he's the first one to acknowledge that. And then you have Andrew Gillum, the mayor of Tallahassee, Florida, who is a progressive, who was supported by Bernie Sanders, who represents, if you will, the new wave, the new wing, the new politics of the Democratic Party. And so this is really a referendum on Donald Trump down there, down in Florida. Carol Tumulty is absolutely right. Just to Susan's point, Susan, we all support and are grateful for the work of the military, but and there are men and women all around the world in uniform and those who have served before. But for Donald Trump to put another $54 billion in the Pentagon budget, which is already larger, our defense budget, than I think the other top 8 countries on the planet, talk about wasteful, unnecessary spending. This is not something the generals asked for. Donald Trump just did it because he wanted to show he's tough on the military. And that money, $54 billion, could have been spent on Medicare, on Medicaid, on education, a lot of other more useful purposes here at home.
We'll go to Dayton, Ohio next. Republican line. Percy, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
We're great. How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm fine. Say, I was a Democrat for probably 35, 40 years. You know, Commander-in-Chief's Commander-in-Chief, one way or another, Democrat or Republican. And I got one question for the old boy there speaking. Can't people open their eyes? Can't people open their eyes and see what Trump's doing? Now he's not the most perfect person in the world. He's got his faults, but I see the economy doing wonderful, great things, and he's doing wonderful, great things with North Korea, and the military, and civilian things.
Well, I have opened my eyes, Percy, and I've put what I see all together in this book. I don't think nobody's perfect. I'm not suggesting that we have to have a perfect person as president. We never have. But I think when you add up the personal faults and the policy faults of Donald Trump, they're particularly, again, I focus on the policies. They've been very, very dangerous for the country. Just the fact, let me mention a couple of things. You know, pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal, we got together with 8 other countries, made a deal with Iran that they would abandon their nuclear weapons program for at least 15 years and maybe forever. A program that was working. Even our Director of National Intelligence, our Secretary of State said there is 0 evidence that Iran was violating that agreement, meaning there was all kinds of evidence that they were living up to it, and yet Donald Trump trashed it. Why? He trashed it because it was a deal made by Barack Obama. And I think that's kind of the central fault, if you will, of Donald Trump's presidency, is that he has one agenda, which is to undo everything Barack Obama had anything to do with, good or bad. Obamacare, get rid of it. Iran nuclear deal, get rid of it. Paris Accords, get rid of them. New CAFE standards on automobiles, which the auto industry, all of them, supported. We can make these cars that get 55 miles an hour. Donald Trump got rid of them. Why? Barack Obama was for them. I think you need a little more of an agenda than that to lead the greatest country on the planet.
And on the book, you write the following: I did not write this book. Donald Trump did. Thanks to Donald Trump, all I had to do every day is go online, watch cable TV, read the paper, capture the latest outrage, I should say. With his help, this book wrote itself. The book is called Trump Must Go. I want to go back, though. Quick comment?
Yeah, quick comment on that. Absolutely, he wrote the book, and he continues to write the book. Every day, there's another reason, or 1, or 2, or 3, that should be in this book. So, Steve, it's not ready yet, but on my website, which is billpressshow.com, there's going to be a special website where people can add their reasons to my 100. And so I had to turn this book in like 2 months ago. So already it would be like probably 150 reasons. Every day there are more reasons to dump him.
Let me turn to politics and the New York governor's race. The New York Times this morning with some extensive stories you can find online or in the newspaper. After the debate, Cynthia Nixon enjoying a day in the free spotlight. Cuomo was firm in ruling out a 2020 run. This is a debate that took place on the campus of Hofstra University. We want to thank WCBS TV, which allowed us to carry the debate on a tape-delayed basis. In case you missed it, it's going to re-air at 7 o'clock Eastern Time Sunday on C-SPAN. But here's an excerpt.
My job as governor is to protect New Yorkers, and whether it's from terrorism or climate change or Mother Nature. But part of the largest threat today is President Trump. He is attacking everything we believe in New York. He's attacking a woman's right to choose. He's attacking immigration. He's attacking the rights of working men and women. He's attacking the environment. Everything we believe. We passed marriage equality, first big state in the United States of America. He will roll it back with his Supreme Court. We passed the toughest gun control law in the United States of America, the SAFE Act. He will roll it back with his Supreme Court. He has to be stopped. I'm in a fight with him. He tweets at me weekly. I welcome it. Know me by my enemies.
I would say that Donald Trump did tweet at you about whether or not America was great, and you backed down pretty quickly. You stood up to him about as well as he stands up to Putin. When it comes to opposing Donald Trump in New York State, we already have a corrupt corporate Republican in the White House. We don't need a corrupt corporate Democrat in Albany as his main opposition. When you look at, we need to oppose Donald Trump not just with rhetoric but with policy. So why, for example, have you not expanded access to driver's licenses to undocumented New Yorkers if you really care about combating the Trump agenda and stopping the mass deportations of New York's undocumented people? This is something that you could do by executive order, something that I have pledged to do on my first day in office. If you really care about a president that's rolling back Obamacare, why haven't you fought harder for single payer? If you really care about women's reproductive health, why have you prioritized Republican leadership of the Senate over the Reproductive Health Act, which would have codified Roe versus Wade into law here?
Cynthia Nixon and Governor Andrew Cuomo in that New York Democratic primary debate from the New York Times assessing the debate. There was no winner and no loser. Polls showing that Andrew Cuomo still has a 30-point lead, but we should also point out that we've seen other polls in other races in which that's changed on Election Day. The primary, by the way, is Thursday, September the 13th, not Tuesday, September the 11th because of 9/11. But your take of this race?
Boy, that was an exciting debate. It really was. It was fun to watch, and I think it's remarkable how far Cynthia Nixon has come with zero political experience and not much money and just the enthusiasm of progressives in New York who want to make a change.
What happens if she wins?
Pardon me?
What happens if she wins? And that's a big if.
Oh, well, if she wins, it'll be as stunning as Andrew Gillum in Florida. And I want to point out that Andrew Cuomo is far ahead right now, but so was Gwen Graham in Florida. And Andrew Gillum was, I think, like 14 points behind or 15 points behind. And he won on Election Day because, again, back to Steve's point earlier, of the enthusiasm and the energy of people going out to vote on Election Day. And that was sort of a populace that the pollsters kind of missed. So this is a very exciting race. And I think, again, it pits the establishment Democratic Party versus this new energy on the progressive side of the party that we saw in Florida, that we saw in the Queens, and that we saw in Georgia, we've seen in other parts of the country. And let me tell you, Andrew Cuomo, he may be well ahead, but you know that he's nervous. He hears the footsteps when he sees what happened to Andrew Gillum, what happened to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in Queens.
And by the way, again, that debate, we want to thank WCBS and just a chance to thank all of the local stations that allow us to carry these debates on C-SPAN, giving a national audience a chance to see what's happening in those states. It will re-air at 7 p.m. this Sunday evening, the full-hour debate from the campus of Hofstra University.
Just a quick footnote to that. It also, to me, this also shows the influence and the power of Bernie Sanders, who didn't win the primary.
Your friend.
Yeah, my friend. I supported him in the primary, supported Hillary Clinton, obviously, in the general.
Will he run in 2020?
Yes, I believe. He has not told me that. I believe he will. But at any rate, he may not have won the nomination, but he did really impact and influence the Democratic Party. We saw that with the Democratic National Committee basically getting rid of superdelegates. We've seen it with the wins of Ben Jealous and Andrew Gillum and Cynthia Nixon's even emergence here as a serious candidate. And notice she's running on Medicare for all. Gavin Newsom, or single payer, Medicare for all is a better term for it. Gavin Newsom is going to be the next governor of California. He's running on Bernie Sanders' platform, Medicare for all. Jared Polis in Colorado, Medicare for all.
Let's go to Michael in Seattle, Washington. Independent line with Bill Press, his new book, Trump Must Go. Good morning.
Hi, Mr. Press. Thanks very much for all your hard work trying to inform the public as to progressive ideals.
Thank you.
I was wondering, do you think that the Democratic Party will actually begin to listen to the voters and begin to get behind the legalization of cannabis? Because I think that's a big part of why Andrew Gillum won in Florida, promising to legalize marijuana.
I missed part of that. There's a little clip there, but I think the question is about
legalizing marijuana?
Well, I think more and more, in fact, I believe Andrew Cuomo in this primary election has reversed or changed his position and now supports the recreational use of marijuana in New York. No, I think not just the Democratic Party, Michael, I think the American people are moving in that direction. I used to think there was a race between same-sex marriage or marriage equality and legalization of pot as to which one was going to get to 50 states first. Well, with the help of the Supreme Court, marriage equality got there first. It won't be long before recreational use of marijuana will get there. But there's still, sadly, I think, some states that even haven't, they're not even in the 20th century, let alone the 21st century, haven't even recognized the importance of medical marijuana. But I think particularly in those states like Washington, like Oregon, now like California, starting in Colorado, where legalization has occurred, there have been zero problems, but there's been an avalanche of new tax money for those states. When other states look at this, they're going to go along either by state legislature or by state initiative, but it's going to happen. And while we're talking about Seattle, I've just got to say, you know, one other name that doesn't get mentioned very often in terms of prospects for 2020 is the governor of Washington, Jay Inslee, former member of Congress, great governor, head of the Democratic Governors Association. I think he'll be a real contender in 2020 and should be.
This is a couple of tweets from one viewer saying, wow, I'm going to give Cynthia Nixon a close look. Cuomo's diapers were paid for by Wall Street. And with regard to your book, this is from BC Venice. Trump's presidency is the biggest black mark in American history. He is using the position for personal gain on top of a mountain of illegal actions, including nepotism. America would be much better off without him, Pence, Ryan, and McConnell. But conversely, there's this from Mike saying, Bill Press just reinforces my belief that the Democrats have had it in for getting rid of my man, Donald Trump. From the day he was elected, it won't work. He will be reelected. That is my personal feeling.
Well, good luck.
We'll go to Harlan in Schaumburg, Texas. Go ahead.
I've got a statement and a question.
Sure. Go ahead, Harlan.
Okay. I used to be a Democrat until people like Bill Press appears on MSNBC and CNN with all the negativity. Bill, why can't you guys get over it? Thank you.
I'll tell you why I can't get over it, because I love my country. And I don't like to see my country led by such a loathsome personality and such a dangerous man in the White House. We are a great country. We are a great people. We deserve better than Donald Trump, period.
The body of Senator John McCain arrived last night at Joint Base Andrews, just outside of Washington, D.C. This is what the ceremony looked like. It is now here in Washington, D.C. in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol. He will be the 31st person in our nation's history to lie in state in the rotunda of the Capitol. And you wrote a piece called The Real McCain, the Phony Trump, in saying that John McCain has received a mountain of praise in the media and elsewhere, quote, because he deserves it. Explain.
You know, back in my CNN days as co-host of Crossfire, Steve, everywhere I went in the country, I was always asked, okay, you're in Washington, you're on TV, you've met all these senators, you've interviewed them all. Is there any one of them, Republican or Democrat, that you really admire? And I would always answer right away, yes, John McCain of Arizona. I became very close to him, admired him so much then and admire him today, because I think he's everything we wanted in a senator. You know, he's hardworking, he was very well informed on the issues. He was a real fighter, a real patriot for his country, serving his country, dedicated to public service, both in the military and in government. And he was, as I know a lot of your callers said in the last hour, someone who really believed in getting things done and reaching across the aisle to bring people together to get things done, and even had the courage to break with the leaders of his own party when he felt it was necessary to get things done. So I think the avalanche of praise for John McCain that we've seen from Republicans and Democrats, from members of the media, from foreign leaders, from just average Americans. I think it's really threefold. Number one is because of who he is. He was a great man. He deserves all of that praise. I think two, because people see with his passing like the end of an era. You know, that time of dedication to progress and getting things done in Washington, as opposed to just bitter partisan fighting, will we ever see that day again? John McCain and Teddy Kennedy kind of exemplified that, and who's there now? That's certainly, that spirit does exist. I think people see that. And thirdly, I do think part of it is the contrast, as I indicate here, when people see John McCain and then they see Donald Trump. And you could not have a greater difference between those two people. I mean, let's just mention one thing. One served his country in Vietnam 5.5 years in the Hanoi Hilton with torture. To the end of his day, he couldn't lift his arms above his head. Somebody else had to comb his hair. That was his Vietnam. Donald Trump told Howard Stern that his Vietnam was avoiding sexually transmitted diseases. I think that kind of sums it up.
One point, and this is a personal note, because you and I were at the Denver airport after the Democratic convention when John McCain nominated Sarah Palin. And I will never forget the look on your face. You call that decision a colossal mistake.
It was a colossal mistake, and John McCain, in the end, admitted that. And I think it's significant and telling that among the people not invited to any of the ceremonies this week, not only Donald Trump was not invited, Sarah Palin was not invited. No, so John McCain was not a perfect man. He named Sarah Palin. He voted for the Trump tax cuts. He voted against the Bush tax. He didn't vote for them, but he supported the Trump tax cuts. He was not back. He was getting medical care at that time, but he did. And he voted for the war. He voted for the war in Iraq. There are a lot of times when I really disagreed. He was much more of a hawk than I am, certainly. I'm not saying I agreed with him on every policy, but you had to, again, admire his love for the country, his service for the country, and his independence. And I think you and I may have also been together in New Hampshire in 2000 in that primary where he beat George W. Bush.
By 18 points.
By 18 points. And I rode on the Straight Talk Express with a lot of other reporters. And you know, in between campaign stops, you'd sit on that bus. John McCain would sit there and take questions on any subject as long as you wanted. And no other candidate has done that since. And I don't think most candidates are even capable of doing that, know the issues well enough to do that.
The Real McCain, The Phony Trump, and the essay by Bill Press. It's available on the Chicago Tribune website. Myra is joining us from Oswego, New York, Democrats Line. Good morning.
Good morning, Bill. I agree with you 100%.
Thank you.
With everything. I'm telling you, I put a lot of hope in the youth of this country and women. We need more women in Congress.
Amen.
I also voted for Bernie in the primaries. I'm just wondering, I'm going to throw you for a loop. Is there any Republican that you could accept as president? And
thank you.
Well, that is throwing me for a loop. Let me say this first of all. I think, how many candidates were there? 16 in the Republican primary?
In 2016, yes.
2016? Mm-hmm. I would say any of the other 15 would be more acceptable to me than Donald Trump. I remember when Scott Walker bowed out, that Scott Walker said, I'm getting out because I know I can't win, and I want to stop Donald Trump, and the only way we're going to stop him is if not just me, but all the others drop out except for one, and we all rally behind one person, and that person take on Donald Trump. That's the only way we're going to stop him. Sadly, they didn't do that, but even Scott Walker at that time. But among them, I would say if I had to choose, I think, this is really going to throw you maybe, I think Chris Christie would have been the one that I think might have done the best job.
Back to the book. On the White House press secretary, both Sean Spicer and Sarah Sanders.
That doesn't mean I'm supporting Chris Christie in 2020. I'm just saying, given those choices, certainly not Ted Cruz, not Rick Perry, probably Chris Christie.
Sean
Sorry.
Spicer's problem was that he would lie about anything for his boss. And he didn't just lie, he was so bad at it, those of us who cover the briefings soon began to dismiss Spicer as a hopeless con man. And with Sarah Sanders, looks like she means it. Like everyone else in this wretched White House, she knows the only way to stay in good graces is to constantly demonstrate her loyalty to him.
Well, let me just say that I've covered the White House thanks to you, Stephen Scully, who encouraged me to get my White House pass way back. All through Barack Obama, I went to the briefings every day under Robert Gibbs and Josh Earnest and Jay Carney in between. Boy, what a difference in the White House briefings between then and now. You didn't, it's not that we all liked everything we heard from the Obama people, but the briefings were serious, they were solid, they were substantial, and there was a lot of tension, a lot of back and forth, but they worked. With Sean Spicer, it was entirely different, starting with his first great big lie when he came in and said, this is the largest audience that ever watched any inauguration, period, or largest crowd, any inauguration, period. And so it started off that way, and you really couldn't trust him. And not only, as I point out in the book, was Sean Spicer telling lie after lie after lie, but he wasn't good at it. And the only thing worse than a liar who's bad at it is a liar who's good at it. And that's what we got, I think, with Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And the briefings today are, it's like an act of war every day. You know, it's just 20 minutes of insults and lies and putting people down and attacking the media. And I think she serves Donald Trump well, but I didn't think she serves the American people well.
Back to your phone calls on the Republican line. East Lake, Ohio. John with Bill Press. Go ahead.
Hello. I have to say to Bill Press that I am extremely sympathetic with his views because I had the same views for 40 years. Now, I cried when Obama got elected. I thought he was going to help the blacks. I worked for Obama on the phones, voted for him twice, voted Democrat again for 40 years. But I saw the light. The liberals, the left, is not good. Here's a little point I'd like to make. What did socialists use before candles? Electricity. That is where the Democratic Party is taking us.
How do you respond to that?
Well, it's hard to respond to that because it's nonsense. Let me just point out that I might point you to a previous book of mine called Buyer's Remorse. That's a book, probably the book written most critical about Barack Obama. I wrote that book when Barack Obama was in the White House. I supported Barack Obama. I worked for him. I'm a Democrat. I'm a liberal. But I was disappointed in some aspects of President Obama's presidency. In that book, I tried to give him credit for all the great things he did, but also point out were some places where I thought that he fell a little short, like Obamacare. Instead of going for Medicare for all, he went for this half-assed system called Obamacare. But my point is, if you look at the presidency of Barack Obama and what he was able to achieve, bringing us back from the worst recession since the Great Depression, you know, the Iran nuclear deal, the Paris Climate Accords, on and on and on, and compare that to the last 2 disastrous years of Donald Trump. John, with all due respect, I don't think you saw the light. I think you've gone in a dark hole, and I hope you get out of it someday.
Our last call is from Michigan, Independent Line. Tim, thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hi, Tim.
Steve. Bill, what a pleasure to speak with 2 representatives of the 2 best networks on television, C-SPAN and Free Speech TV.
All right.
Anyway, Steve, listen, before I get to Bill, could I suggest that you have 2 more phone lines for Republicans? One of them is 1-800-WHAM-WHAM-WHAM, 1-800-WHO-WHO. And if you could, seriously, have a phone line for third-party voters.
Oh, we do have that for independent voters or independent.
No. Well, the reason I say third-party in particular because Republicans, they just don't follow the rules. You know, rules are for everybody else except for them.
But now, can you imagine if we said we have? How did you say that again? One phone line for who?
Well, 1-800-BOO-HOO-HOO.
Okay.
And wow, wow, wow.
We'll let you do that. We won't here. But seriously, go ahead with your question. Thanks for the suggestion. We'll put it in the we'll consider it box.
I'll talk to Brian Lamb myself about it.
Hey, Steve, and don't be offended, but I refer to you as Mr. GQ. God, you're the best dressed man in television. You really are. Anyway.
And your question. Thanks, Tim.
Okay, but you get this one guy. I'm not going to mention his name, but his initials are Jack from Rhode Island. He's called on August 6th, August 15th, and he just called on the 26th. And this is what I mean about Republicans not following the rules. And it's the same thing with elections. They rig everything with gerrymandering, kicking people off the voter rolls. I mean, I just don't get how anybody could be a Republican unless they're just cheaters at their core. But anyway, Bill.
Yes, Tim.
It's a pleasure and honor to talk to you again.
Thank you.
And say hello to Tom and Stephanie. She's my favorite. I'd marry her if I wanted to subject her to a life of misery. But anyway,
Stephanie Miller on
you know
Free Speech
what
TV.
What I don't understand is how Corporal Bone Spurs, where he gets the unmitigated gall, the vile, childishness to criticize John McCain, who I wouldn't vote for, but I respect as a human being.
Hey, Tim, thanks for the call and the comments. Bill Press, you get the last word.
Well, I just want to say that I do think that there was never more evidence of how petty a person Donald Trump is than his response to John McCain during his his illness and his death. The fact that he signed the John McCain National Defense Authorization Act, had a signing ceremony, would not even mention the name of the bill because he didn't want to have to say the name John McCain. The fact that White House aides had prepared a statement for him praising John McCain, which he refused to release, and then the fact that the flag up and down, up, the flag down, the flag up, and he wouldn't even have continued to fly the flag at half-staff over the White House until the American Legion said, come on, you know, this guy is a great American hero, a war hero, you've got to accept it, put the flag down. So that's really sad. But most of all, Tim, I got to say, the most important thing I say is, in response to you, Democrats getting busy, that's the point of this book, right? Which is, midterms are coming up. If you really are not happy with the Trump presidency, which I am not, we got a chance to do something about it, which is get out and vote in the midterms. It's so important for state legislature, for governor, for Congress, and for Senate. We have a duty as an American people to bring about change and not wait for somebody else to do it for us.
Book number 10 by our guest, author Bill Press, Trump Must Go, the top 100 reasons to dump Trump and one to keep him. Thanks for stopping by.
Great to see you, Steve.
Come back again.
Thanks, everybody.